Hello students, Professor Benavides here. Let's talk about the appendix. Specifically in this video, we're going to talk about exception handling. I'll handle the NetBeans debugger in a separate video. So what is exception handling? Well, it's about dealing with errors, dealing with situations when your program crashes. Like when the user enters in a string 5 and you're expecting a number and that number is going to be parsed. Well, you know that the NetBeans is not going to like it and your program's going to crash. What if they try to do something like divide by 0? You know that that's not allowed, so you're going to end up having a crash as well. So what we do is we use something called a try-catch block so that we can go ahead, or a try-catch scheme, so that we can go ahead and handle the situation so the program doesn't crash, so that the user experience a more graceful exit. Okay, they're called exceptions because they should be exceptions to the rule. So this shouldn't be happening, right? You shouldn't be having error, but there can be all kinds of errors. I mean, she only covers 2 different kinds of errors right here. Like what if they enter in a 5 as a string rather than a number, and what if they try to divide by 0? That specifically is the number format exception and the arithmetic exception. Let's see what they look like in code. So here we see a situation where I have a try-catch scheme going on here. I'm asking for 2 numbers, and let's go ahead and say that the user puts in, instead of a whole number, they type in FIVE. So the number format exception is going to catch that, and the message dialog will say you must enter integers. So what happens if they try to divide by 0? Well, in that particular case, you would need the arithmetic exception. In addition, you're going to want to use one right after the other so that you're prepared for both kinds of situations. You know? Now, another possibility here is you use a generic exception. Now, the generic exception can take the place of, can catch any error. The only thing is you don't know what kind of error it is. It could have been that they entered in FIVE. It could have been that they tried to divide by 0. So, and that's why in this particular case we can't be very specific. And she says it doesn't. The generic exception does not allow you to cater functionality to different types of errors. In other words, you can't be very specific as to what needs to be in terms of what kind of feedback you need to go ahead and provide. Now, there's many different kinds of errors. I mean, imagine maybe you have a program that has to open up a file. Well, what if the file's not there? That's going to be a particular kind of exception. So students, many times they ask me, you know, how am I going to know which exception to use? Well, I pretty much say, you know, you pretty much have to fall in the hole first and look at the feedback that the NetBeans gives you, and then that'll be a clue as to what you need to go ahead and do. So exception handling is typically considered a finishing topic. It's done towards the end. You pretty much need to start without doing the try-catch from the very beginning and add that later. So that means you're going to end up doing a lot of cutting and pasting kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at an example here. My first little example here is going to be the program without any kind of exception handling. So here's the program. This is the program that she typed in. You know, so we prompt for a whole number and prompt again, and we go ahead and try to parse that into variables, perform the division, and then show the output. Let me go ahead and show you how that runs on here. I mean, let's go ahead and run it just the way it's supposed to run first, and then we'll start crashing it. So enter in a 10, and I enter in another 10, and 10 divided by 10 is 1. So I know it's working, okay? So now we're going to experience a problem. Let's say that, well, let's just go ahead and run it again, and let's type in 5 like she said. So says here, well, let's say I want to divide 10 by 5. So I enter in a 10, and then I type in FIVE. And then I press enter, and here it is. Let's look at what we got down here at the bottom. This is where this is the dead giveaway as to what you've got to go ahead and do to catch the problem. So here we see, it says, exception in thread main. That means that the problem was inside of the main method. And it's java.lang.number format exception. That's the exception that you got to catch. So it says here for input string 5. So somebody entered in 5, a string, and it didn't like it. Okay, where didn't it like it? It didn't like it where the parse int was trying to get to it. Right? It happened exactly on line 12. Remember, that was the second number that I put in. I put in 5, right? You know, and so the build was failed. And if you want, you can go ahead and click on this little link here, and it takes you right to the place where you had your problem. Okay, that is where I entered in 5. Okay, so let's go ahead and take it up a notch and just take this one at a time. My second demo here, I go ahead and use the number format exception because I saw it, experienced it. Well, let me go ahead and show you the division problem first, and then we'll get into those. So let me go ahead and run this one more time. Back up, run this one more time, and I'm going to do 10, and then I'm going to divide it by 0. So here it says I've got exception in thread main, you know, that comes from the main method, and it's java.lang.arithmetic exception by 0. Okay, so this happened on line 14, right here on line 14. If I want, I can go ahead and click on it, and of course the build was failed, and that takes me directly to the line there. So those are the two problems that we're going to be zeroing in on, and I'm showing you how she found out which exception to handle, right? It's not a guess. You have to actually fall in the hole first, read the error screens, and build your exception, you know, scheme from there. So now I'm going to go ahead and just do one at a time here. So let me go ahead and run this one. All right. So to run this particular ones here, since I put them all on the same, you know, here I'm just going to go ahead and right mouse click on here and go to run file. And so I'm going to go ahead and put in a 10, and then I'm going to put in the 5 that she talks about, FIVE, and see what happens. You must enter integers. You see, I didn't get all that red stuff down there in the bottom. Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and run it again. Remember, you got to go over here and right mouse click on here and go to what? Where's my run? There it is. I'm going to put in a 10. And then I'm going to go ahead and divide by 0. I got the first one handled, you know, the 5 thingy here, and boom, I get that red stuff again, you know, exception in thread main, java.lang.arithmetic exception. So I know I've got to handle the arithmetic exception. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that in my next little demo here. And if you'll notice here, I have 2 of them now, 2 catches. I'm going to be handling the number format exception. That's the one that's going to take care of when they type in FIVE. And this other one here, the arithmetic exception, is going to be the one that's going to handle divide by 0. So let me go ahead and right mouse click on exception demos 3 and go ahead and run it. So I'm going to put in a 10 and then put in a 0. And it caught it. 0 cannot be your divisor. Okay, so that's an example of that. Now, then she closes the chapter with the generic exception, remember? So let's go ahead and take a look at the generic exception. The generic exception is just one catch, and it says it's of class exception rather than arithmetic exception or number format exception. And with the generic exception, it will catch all of the exceptions, but you can't offer any kind of specific kind of feedback as to what happened. All you know is that a problem happened. Okay, so let me go ahead and run this. Right mouse click on here. And I'm going to go ahead and run it. And I'm going to go ahead and try each one of these. So 10, and then FIVE, error. Okay, and just do it one more time, and let's do the divide by 0. Error again. Okay, so there we go. That's an example of how you do this. Okay, so let me just give you just a close by talking about the cutting and pasting that you're going to end up having to do. We're going to end up having to create a try block and then cut and paste the stuff that's going to possibly cause an error. And I'm just going to do the generic exception here to show you, you know, how that's done on here. So remember, the generic exception is class exception. So we're just going to, and we could call it anything we want. We're not even going to use this object. By the way, in case you're wondering, this can be used to provide more information back in your message. And that's really for more advanced classes, you know, on here, okay? So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to come down over here, press enter, and I'm going to type in try. Press enter, open curly brackets, right? And then I'm going to come down again one more time. I'm just going to build the whole structure and then the catch, right? And I'm going to catch exception, E, and then I'm going to have my open curly brackets and close curly brackets. So it's just a matter of copying the stuff in there. Like say, for example, I'm going to get, not copy, I meant to say cut, right? So I'm going to get these three things. No, I'm going to get the all this part here. That'll be a Control X, right? Come down in here, do a Control V. Make sure you do some nice indentations in here. You always want to have things nicely indented. And inside of my catch, I'll have a message dialog, right? Show message dialog. And it will be no. And we're going to go ahead and just say error. Let's see if it works. This is the first one on here. I'm going to go ahead and run it. And I'm going to type in 10 and then FIVE, error. Let's try the second one. And this would be 10, and we'll divide by 0. All right, it works. I'm going to go ahead and provide this code for you. I'm going to go ahead and have the first one without the try catch block in here so that you can practice the cutting and pasting that will be required in order to add exception handling to your programs. All right, well, that's all I have to say about exception handling in your class.